Welcome back, everyone. Hello and good afternoon to you all. If you have just joined us after the lunch break, welcome. We will now continue our program with another important session, another powerful discussion, one that truly sits at the heart of Africa-Gulf cooperation, and it is about how we power the future. Energy, climate, industrial acceleration, and sustainable partnerships are the engines of the next decade, and the choices we make today in infrastructure, in investment, innovation, and governance will define the competitiveness of both regions. This panel brings together leaders who operate across the full energy spectrum, from extractives, oils and gas, petrochemicals, to infrastructure development and international finance. Together, they will help us understand the realities of the energy transition, the emerging opportunities also for Africa and the Gulf, and what it will take to truly build resilient, low-carbon partnerships at scale. So it is now my great pleasure to invite our speakers to join me on stage. Please join me in giving a warm round of applause to Mr. Paul Obambi, Chief Executive Officer, Sapro Mayoko. Un grand bienvenue à vous. It is my great pleasure to welcome as well Mr. Evanilson Machado, Chief Executive Officer, Pumangol. Let's give him a round of applause. Hi. We are welcoming as well Mr. Mehmet Arif Ozozan Group, Chief Executive Officer, UCC Concessions Investments. Welcome to you, sir. Hi. And we are also pleased to have for this conversation a representative from IFC, and I want to make sure that he's with us in the room. So I will calling right now Mr. Aftab Ahmed Khawaja, Regional Director for the Middle East from the IFC. Welcome to you, sir. Very nice to meet you. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today, for being part of this conversation. This panel will flow both in English and in French, allowing all speakers to use the language of their choice. So if you need headsets, please make sure to use them, as we will be moving from one language to another. And allow me to proceed in French to start with. Paul Obambi.
Paul Obambi.
Dans les infrastructures. Ma première question pour vous, comment est-ce que vous voyez la transition énergétique transformer la demande en minerais critiques en Afrique et sur le terrain?
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. In order to answer your question, today we can hear lots of talk about energy transition. However, we cannot know what this means with regard to mineral extraction. And the public in general doesn't understand when we talk about energy transition, we talk about cables, about batteries. And this means replacing fossil fuels with solid minerals with immense quantities, with an unprecedented rhythm for the planet. We can see that in 2035 we will have a deficit of 2,000 tons for certain minerals. So you can imagine the increase in prices and the pressures on development. Also, there will be pressures with regard to zinc. we can see that the demand will double up until 2030, and we see that there are lots of pressures. That's why in my companies, Sahpo, we decided to diversify the investments. We are working and we with in different sectors, zinc and iron. Also, we can see that there are lots of pressures on other minerals such as nickel and zinc, and we can see that pressures are coming from lots of companies, and companies are as well investing in these sectors. They are starting from exploration to the mineral production, and this in order to secure their value chain. They have lots of experiences in this regard, and I hope that the rest of the world will enter this competition in order to make sure that there are several actors in this regard. I can see that there are two major pressures in regard to this sector. We have the time pressure because objectives are on the medium and the long run. So if we need to develop a certain mine, we need like 10 to 15 years. Also, there is another aspect of this pressure, which is the sovereignty. It is we cannot rely on one country in order to secure this energy. And here I can think that the Gulf countries may have a very important role in investing in such sectors. We have to remind that the Gulf countries are ensuring the energy due to the fossil fuel, but for the future we are relying on minerals. And based on this expertise, we can see that the Gulf countries can bring in this financial and diplomatic expertise. And I think that we can establish a very important alliance with regard to natural resources in the African continent and in the African and international market as well. Thank you. Thank you for this clear perspective with regard to the roles of the minerals. I will come back to you in order to delve into details.
From an oil and gas operator's perspective, how is Angola balancing traditional hydrocarbons with the emerging push toward renewable and cleaner fuels? And what are the most immediate challenges that you observe?
Thank you very much for the question. As one of the major players on downstream, what I can tell you is that we are doing what is possible according to our reality, you know. We cannot take examples, or we cannot look at what the others are doing just to copy, because our reality is completely different. We still have today a lot of little communities depending on hydrocarbons every day. We still need it for mobility. And we know that our infrastructure in country is not yet ready, prepared for some of the clean fuels that we are talking about. But despite that, we are doing several movements. For example, the energy distribution is improving a lot on the last years, which reduce our dependence on fuel. In our example, a few years ago, all of our petrol stations were working depending on generators, all of them, all our network. Today we have more than half which is not depending on generators anymore. So we are using the electrical distribution to work and to obviously to use cleaner fuel. But apart from that, there are still some difficulties because the energy distribution is not in all the country. So we are, for example, in some of them using for our petrol stations, putting already solar panels. But there is also difficulties because the partners that are doing that in country, for example, are based in Luanda, but are not doing for all the country. So if you have a project that you want to implement in all the country, you have difficulties also. But I think I will be able to speak a little bit about that and more. But for example, also in our side, what we are doing, because we have a transport company which transport all the fuel in all the country, we are now working in an LNG project, which we want to change all the fleet to use LNG, for example. And this will be a major step in country, obviously. We prefer to start by our own business and then see what the country will receive and what they will implement for soon. We also implement as a, let's say, trying to see if it works, putting some electrical chargers in some of our petrol stations. But we had also regulation issues because we cannot charge per electrical, for example, being a downstream oil and gas company. So there is a lot of work to be done. We are trying to do several things, several steps. We need obviously the support, and I think I will be speaking about that, what can be the support we can have. But we are doing movements according to our reality now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will come back indeed to dig a little bit deeper, understand what type of support is required. But your perspective truly captures the reality of many African producers face, which is balancing today's energy needs with tomorrow's low carbon commitments. Thank you for that. Mr. Ozozan, coming to you now, given your experience in large-scale infrastructure, what are the biggest obstacles slowing down the development of clean energy and resilient infrastructure projects across Africa Gulf corridors?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very pleased to be here and very much honored with among my esteemed colleagues here. To repeat, my name is Mehmet Arif Ozozan. I'm the Group Chief Executive Officer for UCC. We are a Qatari-based company, but we covered more or less all over the world. So we have a very big, huge portfolio in Central Asia, Middle East, now the Syria, which is opened recently. And we also in North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, actually. So we are heavily involved. Also, we do try to develop projects as investor as well as contractor in Latin America and Caribbean regions as well. So we are one of the largest in the region, and we are among top 20 contractor among the ENR. So we are heavily involved in each and every geography, basically. So I think we have a good position to judge or evaluate, assess the comparison between different geographies and what are the bottlenecks. I will come to the bottlenecks. I have consolidated in 5 main items. But to start with, when I see Africa, I see it's not a geography only. I see a land of opportunity. When I say the opportunity, it's not only related to the investment or getting a return against your risk. It is an opportunity for people who live there, for the citizens or the people of Africa, as well as in cooperation with the global world. So there's a great potential in there. So when I see this is the youngest population, the youngest populated continent in the world. The second is the huge natural resources. I mean, the carbon, fossil fuel, mining, as well as on the renewable side. So I think this is one of the richest continent, if not the first one in the world. So when you see such opportunity, so you have all the ingredients actually, and you need a good cook. Or you need a good recipe to wrap everything up actually, which is not the easiest, but not the most difficult part either. So when I see the infrastructure, let's say background or the foundation currently, And I would like to separate Northern Africa and the Sub-Saharan Africa, basically, where the Sub-Saharan is really, really rich in terms of natural resources. I can identify 2 points. One, these are huge infrastructure projects. You cannot do from your pocket the whole. I mean, you need to fund through equity, the investors' money, as well as the heavily you have to rely on the third-party financiers, either financial institutions, the development banks, export credit, as well as together with them some commercial banks. In doing such a project, it has to be leveraged. It has to be mainly based on project finance, limited or non-recourse basis, because otherwise you cannot attract really the most of the worldwide investor, because investor looks actually any other place. The money liquidity is very much flowing. It goes from one country to another, so it goes to some other places which they feel more comfortable, and where the system is better and the contractual scheme as well as the legal framework is stronger. So the first thing is the financing gap that I see. It's not lack of capital, actually. In the world, currently, to some sayings, there's 16 or 17 trillion dollar liquidity, which are waiting for investing in some other places. So 16, 17 trillion dollar. Is it freely flowing to needed countries? No. There are some reasons. First, after several financial crises, after COVID, etc., so the investor and the financial institution became very risk aversive. The risk appetite is slowing down. And risk versus return, depending on the country structure, legal framework is changing from one country to other, even within Africa. North is different than Central, Central is different than West and East and South Africa. So you need to have the funding which is suited, because money likes security, stability, as well as a strong legal framework, impartiality. Being impartial is very, very important. So I will come in more detail a little bit. The second is the sovereign and the political risk. This is very important because the fundraisers, even the development banks or fundraisers which having non-profit aim, like IFC, World Bank, the EBR, the EIB type, they are looking safety and security. So political stability is the uncertainty is very important. The second, I would say, also the sovereign risk, because at some point, direct or indirect, the sovereign, the host government should take some risk and should be ready to covering some risk of the components, like the legal risk, like the regulatory risk. So third, I would say the currency and treasury risk. The volatility in the FX is a major issue. So this needs to be either hedged, or the contracts which are provided to invest needs to be hedged naturally within the contract itself, indexed to the foreign or hard currencies, or having a more stable economy that there is no volatility. Because you invest $100 here, you have to be sure that you will get back the $100 back plus maybe 5, 10, 15% return on it. Otherwise, if you lose from day one, I mean, half of your capital invested, you cannot attract not a foreign investor, neither the banks, because they want to get paid as well. And we'll be very quick. The technical bottlenecks, the infrastructure scheme in each country, in the continent is important. For electricity, the grid. For the gas, it is the pipeline. For airport or any other, it is the connecting road, etc. The whole network, both on the IT, digital, as well as on the hard infrastructure, would need to be completed, to be improved. In grid, a lot of transmission lines, a lot of pipelines, which has to feed the system and the power. And last but not the least, the regulatory uncertainty. So, as I said, all investors, banks, and the financing institute likes the certainty. The regulation should be put in place. Like, to give an example, in most of the contract, we request international arbitration. Why? To remove the impartiality risk, okay? In everywhere. So the countries, they shouldn't be over, let's say, sensitive on it, because these are the important issue. I'm looking for my timeline. I'm exceeding a little bit. So I have a lot of things to discuss. Maybe after the forum, I'm happy to discuss where I cover the Africa continent as well, and to share my experience and our way to go forward. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your perspective. We appreciate your experience, and indeed, we do have networking sessions that will allow us to go deeper, but that was a very pragmatic breakdown of why infrastructure delivery still lags behind ambition. Mr. Kawaja, I would like to turn to you now and mention Mission 300, which aims to connect 300 million Africans to electricity by 2030. From IFC's perspective, what are the most critical success factors for Mission 2030, and which segments of Africa's energy transition remain underfunded despite the strong demand for it?
First of all, thank you. Thank you. So let me introduce, I'm Aftab Ahmed, Khwaja Aftab Ahmed. I'm the regional director for IFC, covering my Middle East, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And it's very interesting that, of course, Africa, there are a lot of development challenges, but the country which I covers in Middle East, whether it's Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Palestine, the development challenges are very similar. These are countries where you get 2 to 4 hours of electricity in most of these countries. And no stable electricity, water and is issue, education, youth employment, women participation. And when you map these development challenges, you can easily compare it with any country in Africa. So that's the similarity. And a lot of these challenges Mr. Ouazzane has covered in his opening remarks. So in terms of M300, first we need to understand what was the need for M300. M300, World Bank Group came up with an initiative partnering with the African Development Bank to provide electricity to 300 million additional African population. And to understand that over the last 15 years, electricity outreach has improved. A lot of work has been done from 35% of population to almost 50%. But what has happened in between, that population has increased from 900 million people to over 1.2 billion. So today, only half of Africa has access to electricity. It's a huge problem. And all these development institutions, private sector, government, they were all working around it. It took 15 years to increase the accessibility of electricity by 300 million. And now you can see it's a very, very aggressive target in 6 years from 2024 or 2023 when this initiative was announced by World Bank President Mr. Ajay Banga to 2030. We have to really work hard with all our partners to provide access of electricity to 300. What was done in 15 has to fast track in 6 to 7 years. And of course, in between, the population from 900 million has increased to $1.2 billion. And just to give you perspective in terms of consumption, the per capita consumption in Africa, it's slightly over 600 kilowatt hour, which is 5% per capita consumption of US, which is over 12,000 kilowatt hour. You can well imagine that even with this consumption of 600 kilowatt, the outreach is only to 500 million, or half of the population. And just to give you more perspective, one state in US, California, consumes the same amount of electricity just for the video gaming put together Senegal and Botswana. So total generation of Senegal and Botswana is almost equivalent to what California consumes on gaming video. You can understand the quantum of the problem. And although all stakeholders were already working, like energy was one of them, because if you see, without electricity, you can't do development, because even if you want to provide water, you have to create jobs, you have to create industry. Energy is one of the critical ingredient for development. And it's a basic right for any human being getting access to energy. And so out of the 300 million new connections to, I think, World Bank Group has committed 250 and African Development Bank has committed 50 million. So as I mentioned, it's an uphill task. What are the critical factors? The first factor is mobilization. As Mr. Zazan said, that there are a lot of issues because many of these projects, because of the high risk, because of the cost, are not bankable. So business as usual will not work. So we have to come up with tools, with an open mind, with structures which satisfy, because public sector, government doesn't have the fiscal space to meet these challenges. So it has to be private sector. You have to provide structures where private sector within the country, within the region and outside the region feel comfortable investing in those countries. And or hybrid structure, public-private partnership where government takes a role and private sector takes a role in terms of and share risk. So we came up with a very interesting innovative structure. One was a permanent capital company called Zafiri, which will provide both soft loan and long-term loan to specifically targeting off-grid solutions. Because in Africa, because of the problems with the grid, because transmission, a lot of the solution, 50% of the solution will come from mini grids and off-grid and distributed energy. The second is World Bank Group came up with Frontier Opportunities Fund, where we are leveraging our own balance sheet in terms of providing blended finance to some of these large projects. And I think the thinking was that we are already doing that, but we have to be much bolder, much more aggressive to come up with, for ourselves, much aggressive targets. So we have already met around 10% of the target. We are outreach in slightly more than a year. We have outreach or new connections of, or new supply of 3.1 million consumer, still a long way to go. Then other products are, as mentioned, we have early stage development equity, because a lot of these developers want somebody to come and share risk with that, and other de-risking structure, making the reforms, structures more bankable, and then mobilize. In return, once you have these blended finance, I think a value of dollar. If you are coming with a donor money, a dollar will create an impact of dollar. But when you channelize that dollar in terms of blended finance, the leveraging can be 5 to 20 times, depending on what the structure is. So a donor will get much more impact by putting $1 compared to putting it directly as a donor money. Mm-hmm. The second thing is that what we have done as an institution is we have moved into more challenging sectors and countries, large hydropower, co-development, Cameroon, Malawi, Mozambique. These are the few examples. The second part, as I mentioned, development challenge is jobs. I think energy creates a lot of jobs, and our estimate is that Africa energy sector is projected to create about over 7 million jobs. And giving you one example, that through our project, World Bank Group projects in Kenya, solar company, now they employ 6 times more people than the largest utility company in Kenya. So you can see that solar or energy sector, how much impact it can create on all sector. Mm-hmm. The third thing, the critical factor is innovation, because as I mentioned, business as usual is not a solution. So from innovation, because of the problems of grid transmission, you have to focus on various solutions. You have to focus on mini grids, you have to focus on distributed energy, policies, reforms, unified policies for countries, so that if an investor is coming in one country, can see the policies and invest, diversify risk in investing on 2 or 3 or more countries. So innovation is another key factor. The fourth one is partnerships, because the problem is so huge. So that's why we are not doing it alone. We have partners like African Development Bank, Rockefeller Foundation, a number of other partners who are working with us. We have come up with another partner, Ascent program. harmonizing around 20 countries supporting grid expansion and scaling the distributed renewables. We have partnership with the civil society, private sector, donors, government, and 29 African countries have developed national energy compact with time-bound targets. The fifth one is, I think, which includes, I said, investing in distributed renewable energy areas, transmission and distribution. So holistic solution rather than just focusing on generation, climate resilient water and agriculture solutions, clean cooking. So as I mentioned, to really solve the issue, you have to attack from all angles with all partners, with all type of structures. And here, the GCC companies or GCC can play a huge role. And we are seeing a lot of interest from GCC in terms of moving, not because of charity, but they see good business case.
Win-win situation.
Win-win situation on investing in GCC. And a lot of, like our partnership in the region, I can give you example of Aqua, I can give you example of Masdar, EMEA. They're all working with us in investing in being partner to M300 structure. So I'll stop there, and I'm ready to take any follow-up questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's a lot to say there, indeed. I very much like the examples that you shared, which were really striking. And that was a powerful reminder of both the urgency and the opportunity that lies ahead. For the second round, quicker second round, because I would like us to collectively keep some time to interact with the audience. I think it's really important to get the pulse of the room as well and feed in their thoughts. I would like us in this second round to move toward solution and long-term collaboration. So we will focus on that. Et je vais me permettre de revenir vers vous, Paul. Allow me to switch to French and kindly use your headsets if needed. Paul, sur le sujet.
Paul, how do Africa and the Gulf, concretely, how can they build value chains that are competitive with regard to minerals, going beyond extraction? And here we can talk even about manufacturing. This is the main question of this forum. We are talking about the collaboration and cooperation between Africa and the Gulf countries. We can see that the old model is not working anymore. This model where Africa is giving its resources and the rest of the world is transforming, I think that this model, as obviously it is, must go beyond this. I think that Qatar has started to do this, and here I can talk about transforming iron today. We can see today that Qatar is having a joint venture with the Algerian state, the Nigerian state, and they have established the Algerian Qatar Steel that is producing iron and steel. This is done from resources coming from Algeria. It is manufactured in Algeria and exported in Europe. So I think that these are models on which we can rely for future collaborations between the companies in the Gulf countries and African countries. For example, in our own situation as a producer of iron, we must have opportunities and open the way for the companies in the Gulf countries to work in these sectors and to have joint ventures in order to produce iron. And we can have models such as the Qatar Steel. It's not only about the offers that can be done. There is also the demand side that is very important. In the region where I live and which is a part of the Central Africa, I think we have around 200 million people in this region, and those people today are consuming a small part of steel because they cannot do it and that they do not have the necessary currency to import this steel. So we need manufacturing. Building several economic zones in this region is necessary, and we can think that in the upcoming years, this zone can even consume more than 20,000 tons of steel. So this will be an opportunity for the Gulf countries and their companies which are specializing in this sector to position themselves in a strategic manner on the long run. So from one side, I think that Africa can benefit from joint venture with Gulf countries based on their technical expertise, and they have also expertise in other sectors such as oil and gas. On the African side, they can offer a lot to the Gulf countries and their companies with regard to the raw material and the markets of today and in the future. And it's time for them to take their position there, and I think that the whole world will be aware of this situation, and this is the initiative of Choiseul and the Qatari government to come and discuss this topic. Thank you for this perspective. I think that there is another question which is anchoring these manufacturings, which is what is your thought with regard to this will to work locally and to install these manufacturings locally. From one side, we cannot talk about energy transition and ecology without doing a transition. We need the resources. We cannot take the resources and send them back to Africa to consume them. So we need to be coherent, and we need a local value chain in order to respond to regional demand. And this is very important. However, this requires expertise, and it requires as well the financial expertise. And here we can rely on the companies in the Gulf. This is, of course, a very strategic choice. Thank you for your perspective.
Still in this question of partnerships, as we want to focus on this in the second round, what concrete partnerships between Africa and the Gulf could accelerate the decarbonization of downstream sectors, refining, distribution, and petrochemicals?
First of all, let me tell you that since the first day of the forum, I have made a lot of interactions with already few suppliers and experienced companies on that. And in all of that interactions, I left very clear that, yes, we need financing, we need the experience, we need support on managing some of the infrastructures we already have. We need support to revamp, to change some of them. But principle, we need know-how. We don't need only suppliers that come. I gave you an example before, that come, implement the solar panels, and then when we need support after sales, we don't have, because they are not implemented in country. They are outside the country. We cannot have plan to implement LNG project and then we don't produce trucks, we don't do nothing in country, so we need after to be able to manage and don't depend also on the partnership. So partnership, for me, it's important. That can be something which the partner will be also respecting the country reality and understand that we need more than money, we need more than experience or help to implement. We need first after sales support, and we need know-how, because we need to train our people to be able to manage it after that. And we don't have now. That's why some of the projects are just in paper, and then we are not able to, because it's not lack of money, you know? And we need really to make sure that the companies are coming to Angola, either to support on the new refineries we are doing, on the big facilities of storage we are doing, on projects of electric cars, but we need support, for example, doing a good regulation. Good regulation now, for example, we are trying to do, implementing on petrol stations, electric chargers, as I said to you. We don't have regulations. We don't have how to incentivize companies to bring electric cars, companies to do so. We need to do it, because we will implement electric chargers, but if there is no incentives for companies to import electric cars or something like that, we will not have it. And as I say, Angola is not Luanda. And we have a lot of companies now implementing in Luanda, but when you need support outside Luanda, because we have our operations in all the country, so we need also a partnership that look on the country, not only on the biggest piece of the cake, which is Luanda, the capital, you know. And so it's what I have been sharing with all the partners and all the people that I have been discussing here, is that yes, we need all of that. We need financing, we need supporting and implementing, we need that, but we need really that you be able to respect our pace, because we will not do it looking over the others. We do it according to our reality, but especially we need that you live in country the know-how.
Yes.
It's important for us.
Very clear. Thank you for sharing your message. Thanks for that. Mr. Ozozan, second question to you again about this, your perspective. How can Gulf Engineering and infrastructure groups partner with African governments to scale resilient energy infrastructure, transmission, storage, integrated industrial zones? I'd love your perspective on that.
Sure. I'd like to cover, to elaborate a little bit the big picture.
Yeah.
Okay. And here, first of all, there are a lot of things usually that we all know, and these are simple things. And the way of leadership or success, according to Sun Tzu, is do the essential things well. As long as you do things well, even if they are simple, so you are the outcome will be success, definitely. I would say, based on our experience, my experience, the master planning is important, okay? The master, having the big picture, because yes, increasing technology, leverage technology, all is fine, but technology to be used where they are needed, where they are useful to do it. Investing in smart meters where you don't have an appropriate transmission network or grid, it doesn't mean anything. You will get the meters and you will put in the warehouse waiting for the 5 years, 2 years, 3 years. So the mastermind planning is very, very important thing. This is one. Then, of course, to follow the having things in large scale, okay, to attract the banks and the investor. I would rather to deal with some on-platform basis rather than each and every detail smaller size project, because if you have, for example, a master plan for school, for example, alternative financing, because you need to mobilize public funds, you need to mobilize private funds, so the PPP models, just diversify the financing scheme. This is one thing very important. So also having a platform approach so that to mitigate the risk for the direct financial institution, commercial lenders, as well as private investors. So this is something important. And once these, the generic of the necessary infrastructure is put in place, then of course you have to leverage the technology. So you need to improve, rehabilitate the transmission lines, the grid, the system, the roads, everything. Another thing is also encourage and incentivize the medium, small-size enterprises, because these are the, I mean, I'll have to say something which is very important to me. One day in one of my training, the guy, I mean, it's from HR related, my consultant said, sorry for my French or language, but what is the role of a CEO? Because, for example, you have a machine, laundry machine. What happens? The brain of the machine just burn out, okay? It is just the integrated circuit chip. You change the chip and you put, this is the CEO. The mid-management for a company is the big tambour, you know, it is in the laundry machine. So they are making the whole work actually. So this is why the key driver for the economies are the small and medium enterprises for your subcontracting, the local production, local manufacturing, just providing the necessary spare parts to the higher technologies, okay? Once you build this up, so once you localize the ecosystem, then like increasing the know-how, working with universities, increasing the training and the promote the local labor force, so that it is a strong ground to build up. So what the Gulf also could provide. So this is the one of the success of the Gulf region actually, because there's a huge transitional change since maybe last 10, 15 years in the Gulf as well. It's not only resource issue, it's not only money issue. Now the Gulf is putting added value to the countries, to the projects, to the investments. So this is something also very important. And also I would very much fond of it or favor or incentivize government-to-government relationship. My experience, I have seen always government-to-government the commitment, involvement helps the investor, helps the infrastructure. For example, we as company, we have bilateral agreement between Kazakh government and Qatar government, so that all country rulers or the management, the political scene, they are supporting the project. Of course, it's a private investment, but some incentives or some rights are given through the bilateral agreements, which become law in its respective countries, in Kazakhstan and Qatar, actually. I would favor this. We are working on that kind of things in Africa as well, okay? For Syria, even if there is not the government-to-government, but we know that it is under the umbrella of the government, because sometimes you need to improve the tax regime, improve the legislation, the regulation. This is why it's very important to promoting and to incentivize the government commitment towards the others. In such a case, including the private investor are more careful actually, so to execute the jobs timely and on budget. So as I said, the innovative financing blends like the concessional financing, public funds, DFI's involvement, and also will attract the commercial side of the projects or transaction. And of course, the one thing, but not the least, again, I said it is the human resource. So education, training, attracting the people. And the last but very important point, transparency and governance. This is the first, transparency is very important. Governance is important because you are not tied up with only the one person. You are dealing with a country, with people, with the citizens of that country. You have responsibilities towards that country and to those people. So this is very, very important. And also remove red tape, bureaucracy, just centralize all the necessary functions together in the country. You need investment permit, any certificate or anything at the government level, better to centralize through a one investment committee so that they are guiding because they know better. Of course, local partnership is very important. Without local partner, you cannot be successful, okay? You don't know the country, the local partnership, which we are offering actually, and we want to have a win-win situation for every aspect. So because as companies, we don't have only, we are profit-oriented, we have social responsibilities. So we need to contribute and add value to the world, to the people, to the countries. And in the meantime, of course, some return on the risk associated with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this perspective. A lot has been unpacked there. Doing business, streamlining the processes alongside with the transparency, the talent. Thank you for covering all those aspects which are really important. Before we wrap up the panel, I want to give heads up to you all. I'm going to turn to you in a short while to get some questions, some reactions. Again, it is really important for us to interact with you all, so please make sure and don't hold back into sharing your perspectives with us. Mr. Kawajak, wrapping up the panel with you. You mentioned blended finance early on. From your perspective and IFC's perspective, what are the most effective blended financing structure in accelerating Gulf investments into Africa's renewable energy, green hydrogen, and climate resilient infrastructure?
Thank you, Manal. So, first of all, I'll react on what the closing of Ozazan. He mentioned few things which resonates very well. Governance, transparency, and training, capacity building. These are very important ingredients, especially when you go to difficult markets. And that's why when you have organizations like IFC and World Bank, because we start with that. We have investment arm, we have advisory services arm, and we look into corporate governance, we do a corporate governance review, and then we go and advise the board, advise the company what needs to be done. Because whatever you invest, if you don't have right set of governance principle, you don't have transparency, how much you invest, it will be, you won't be sure that what will be the impact. To create an impact, I think I fully agree, it's very, very important. Coming back to blended finance, I think especially GCC, the governing model has changed. In the past, GCC's model was easy task, give money, give donor money, and then let the government or private government handle it. And they realized that although they have been giving so much money to different governments, but the impact wasn't there because the private sector was not involved. And that's why they came to organizations like IFC for the governance part, for the transparency part, because they could see transparency and governance. And one reason is, especially in Qatar and broadly GCC, we get a lot of, when it comes to private sector requests for investing in more difficult countries. So the risk appetite, I was amazed to see the risk appetite that a lot of the Gulf and especially Qatari investors want to invest in Syria, very difficult environment, want to invest in Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, want to invest in Kenya, Ghana, all of those countries. And for that, they need partners who, with that, like the multilaterals or development financial institution, because that provides you pseudo-political risk guarantee as well. Then I'll come to the blended finance part. What we believe is a minimum concessionality. So why these Gulf institutions trust us? Because when in a project, if say $10 million is required, we will not even put $11 million. We make sure that we put minimum concessionality, so we don't subsidize the project. The second thing is on the cascading principle. So whenever we are doing a project, first we see if this project is bankable on its own strength from private sector perspective. We don't need any concessionality. We don't want to involve the government or anything. So this is a pure private sector model. Then you see it's a very high impact project, but on its own, because of the high risk, it may not be fully bankable. Then we look into blended finance solutions, structuring solutions, so that these projects, we can make them bankable. The third is the hybrid model. Okay, you need both public sector and for certain project, energy, infrastructure, and many of these projects, you need private and public sector to come hands on hands and take risk, equitable risk on both sides. So that's the third model. The third one is a hybrid model, but you see a project, public-private partnership, but there's a viability gap funding. So you come up with donor money for viability gap, and only rely on taxpayer money where a project is a social project where private sector is not interested. So this is the overall governing model for blended finance. And because of the interest, especially in Qatar, recently, I don't know how many are you aware that World Bank Group decided to open an office in Doha, which is a vote of confidence in terms of the country and the potential of the country. And we have placed one of our most seasoned country manager in the country. So there are number, as I mentioned before, there are a number of blended finance solutions. You start from junior equity. So if it's a high-risk project, the investor wants somebody to take share risk, you come up with the junior equity. You come up with the first loss, and we always recommend to come up with a pool of first loss rather than project-to-project first loss. You come up with, if the, say, interest, because of the risk, banks are charging high interest rate, you come up with interest rate buyout. You come up with first loss, you come up with sub-debt. So there are a wide array and that you have to tailor-made. You can't have a cookie-cutter approach, tailor-made, depending on the cash flows of the project, whether it's a seasonal cash flow or is a continuous cash flow. You structure those projects to make it more attractive for the private sector. Then we need to see how we can engage the capital market, like green bonds, sustainability linked bond, because there's a lot of appetite internationally or globally. There's a lot of money available for climate. So you look into those projects and see how you can make them greener so that you can bring concessional money. Then, as mentioned, local currency, because many of these markets, the revenue are in local currency, and it's unfair you put exchange risk to these markets. So you come up with, use blended finance to structure local currency. And then as I mentioned, the PPP. So you look into wherever you need partnership with the government, you do PPP project. I already gave a lot of examples on how we have a structured with the GCC investors, with Aqua and others in Senegal and a lot of places. And we are getting more and more traction because these investors see that as a virgin land. They see that there's less competition. If there will be a first mover advantage in many of these markets, but they need support from multilateral DFIs, commercial banks, provider of blended finance. So it's a whole ecosystem where you have to address from advisory services to reforms what are needed, and then a whole array of both commercial lending and concessional lending. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that perspective, a really comprehensive one, really interesting also to break down all these different structures. Thanks again. Before we wrap up, I want to turn to the audience now, see if there are any questions, reactions. Yes, please. I see the gentleman, third row in the middle. Any other questions in the room? Yes, and also the lady right after, second row.
Thank you so much. Michael Patrick Joyce. I'm a lawyer and an arbitrator and a mediator. Mr. Ozazan spoke about the need for managing legal and regulatory risk, and particularly focused on international arbitration. And I wonder whether Africa can be a test bed or a proving ground for a simpler method of dispute resolution, namely mediation. So I'd be very interested in the panel's views from the perspective of a financier and an investor and companies themselves as to the use of mediation, l'utilisation du médiation en Afrique. Merci, thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. We take the second question from the lady second row, and then we close with the perspective of our panel.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Naima Mirai Balou. I make chocolate in Madagascar. It's not much a question, but more of a remark, and I thank Mr. Ozazan for talking about it a bit. We talk a lot about capital, how much we can do, what the institutions can do to empower Africa, to empower the partnership between the Gulf and Africa. I think we talk very less about the people. Yes, we talk about capital, but like the change starts with the people. That's what I believe. And whether like for sure like the World Bank does a lot of work, but like for from an entrepreneur on the ground, these institutions like often feel very far and not accessible. And I think this should be like the change is from big companies like most of you here, but also the change I think starts with smaller companies which are closer to the people and more accessible to the people as well. And I think there is a lot of work to do to have like more access to the bank and all this institution with less work. It's a lot of work to access these, a lot of compliance and all of that. And it takes many people to build these files to access these opportunities. So I think this is something that has to be like, make like better, like to, how to say it, like more accessible. And also, how do we think about like how the people will access these jobs if we don't talk about like the skills, improving schools. I think it starts from there because yes, we say that Africa is the youngest like continent in the world, but how are these kids trained? How are they like empowered? Do we give them the possibility to dream bigger? And
Yes.
do we give them the possibility for these dreams? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your perspective. So, as you see, we have still 2 minutes on the clock. Final words for you, please. It's on.
I'm promoting technology. I cannot use it. Sorry. And as for the arbitration, so if I got it correctly, this issue it's not something new. I mean, I'm in business for more than 30 years, actually. So it was always the case, especially in the developing countries. So we started with, the ICCI rules, etc. We are using different mediation techniques as well. And also some other conventions, the ICSID, UNCITRAL, I mean, depending on the country and the risk they are presented based on the legal system or jurisdiction. And, but at least from an investor point of view, what I can say, this is a must in most of the project finance driven places that we are work with. So the most of the geography we are covering, we are requesting. And also, I mean, Mr. Kawasha would make a better comment on it as a bank, I would say. This is also a requirement by the international financing providers. So your question, is it maybe because the voice not, I couldn't hear well. So is it the mediation can replace the arbitration, right? That was the question. Yeah, I mean, I would say depending on, because it should be treated case by case. My personal experience, I am okay with some places with the mediation, okay? Even sometimes in the contracts, there is a process. The expert, then you go to mediation, and then you go to the arbitration. Sometimes we do accept we are flexing a possibility of having the expert decision even binding, but not for the major provision, not for the major issues. Some technical issues, because arbitration is a lengthy and very costly process. I personally lived several times. Sometimes I won, sometimes I lost, and especially losing is the worst part of it. And this is why we have to use whatever possibility, I mean, as a management and as other instruments, expert mediation, yes, in some part, but arbitration, again, especially, I mean, developing countries would always remain as one of the critical items. This is at least my understanding, maybe, as a bank.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your perspective. I know there's a lot to say. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your expertise. But we want to stay on time, on track. So please give them a round of applause. Kindly rewrap this panel. Thank you so much. Can you please step in the front of the stage for the group photo? And then we will proceed. Yes.